Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, it's Dueling Dragons with Reign of Fire and Dragonheart. Yeah, it's time for another Versus episode here on Genre Vision, and we I can't wait to get to a certain part of this episode. But before we do that, some calls to action. We want to thank loyal listener Moldy Wilson, who became a premium subscriber on Patreon at patreon.com/genrevision. Thank you so much, especially now with everything going on and the situation that we find ourselves in. The Patreon matters more than ever, you guys.
Yeah, it's incredibly important to us, not only from a financial standpoint to keep the show running, but it's important to us that you all have things to do and things to listen to during this time where social distancing is encouraged. We always pride ourselves at Genre Vision for our community. You know, our really tight-knit, loyal listener community has been a really important resource for us. And the fact that it could be important to you as well just warms our hearts. So we've got great things going on at genrevision.com, but even better things happening at patreon.com/genrevision.
So please go check that out. It's just $5 a month to become a premium subscriber. You'll get access to the hours upon hours of bonus content that we've got, and it's only growing. If you dig what we do, become a premium subscriber. And or leave us a review on iTunes, or I guess it's Apple Podcasts now. We don't pay to advertise the show at all, and reviews are the best advertising we've got. If you do leave a written review, we promise to feature it here on the show.
Indeed.
Let's spit some fire on Reign of Fire and Dragonheart. We're going to start with Reign of Fire because even though it's the later movie, it's the one that we watched first. Reign of Fire, it's interesting. These are both movies that I saw in the theater upon release. They're movies that I had fond memories of. And Reign of Fire is a movie that I always thought about, why does nobody talk about this? This seems like perfect cult gem material. And upon revisiting Reign of Fire, I think I know why people don't talk about this movie. Reign of Fire is neither remarkably bad or remarkably good. For a movie about the dragon apocalypse, it's kind of just fine.
Reign of Fire is directed by Rob Bowman, who you might recognize as one of the essential X-Files directors. He actually directed the X-Files movie, which is called X-Files Fight the Future in some releases. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he's a strong genre. I won't call him a genre stylist, but he's a genre workman. I won't quite call him a journeyman because he has certain things and certain looks, you know, that I like are almost sort of signature, but the kind of technical work that he puts into his films is strong without ever being unique.
It's never flashy. Like he's a solid director, but I can't speak to a particular Bowman style.
No, I mean, he's not exactly a terribly arty guy. Like literally the artiest thing that happens in Reign of Fire is right at the beginning where there's some like really slow shutter footage of pigeons flying around in London. Mm-hmm. And that's about it. You know, it's like, oh, okay, somebody wants to be a little arty John Woo for just a moment. And then the movie sort of kicks off, you know, in earnest. And Reign of Fire, like Drew said, is Dragon Apocalypse. It's a fairly high concept movie where it's just like, there's an apocalypse caused by dragons, and that's pretty much it. Reign of Fire was released in summer of 2002, and it didn't do well. I didn't see it in theaters, but I definitely watched it on DVD and remember thinking, well, that was okay. And a lot of the feedback, you know, particularly the negative feedback that I've heard about Reign of Fire over the years has to do with, you know, what was the impression that they were going to get from the marketing versus the impression they got from the film. There was a disconnect there. Like, if you look at the poster for the movie, it's a whole bunch of dragons spraying fire down upon London.
Great poster.
Yeah, it's a great poster, but this image does not happen in the movie, and whatever this is like, yeah, maybe that happened in the lore of this movie, but
well, yes,
that's done by the time our movie really picks up.
The appeal of the movie seems to be oh yeah, let's see the dragon apocalypse. However, the opening of the movie, in which our lead character Quinn is a kid going to visit his mom, played by Alice Krieg, who's doing some kind of dig in the middle of London. And this is what awakens the first dragon who comes out and then commence Dragon Apocalypse. Then the movie goes into montage and narration saying, well, this is how the Dragon Apocalypse happened, and now we're in the post-Dragon Apocalypse. So the movie skips what's kind of the most interesting idea that you're promised. It's unfortunate, though, because I like the opening of this movie in terms of setting up tone and approach, and it's probably, sadly, the best dragon stuff that we get in the movie as far as the dragon or dragons feeling like actual villains.
It's very Alien, this opening. It's lots of dark tunnels. You know, a character wanders into a space where there's a monster and it's, you know, dripping saliva from its mouth. We don't get a good look at it. There's some sort of genuinely tense creature stuff, you know, that's happening here. You know, Rob Bowman shot this thing well. It looks good. He shot it on nice anamorphic lenses. There's money here. It doesn't look cheap. It's a pretty handsome production.
It looks good. It looks like a big blockbuster production. But then after this opening and this montage in which Quinn now has grown up to be Christian Bale, and he is kind of the de facto leader of this band of people who have survived and are living in these underground tunnels. And he's telling us about, okay, yeah, dragons came and burned everything and killed everybody. Mankind ended up launching nukes at them. Apparently that didn't work because dragons are still around. So now the world is a post-apocalypse. At first, I like what the movie sets us up with. It's like, okay, we're going to see how this community functions. And the way that we're introduced to the community functioning has some really interesting and even endearing moments.
Yeah, even for actors that aren't typically all that endearing. Christian Bale and Gerard Butler are like the sort of number one and number two guys in this settlement. This is all shot somewhere like, I don't know, like in a rock quarry in Ireland. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very gray and austere. You know, it's kind of deliberately medieval, which is kind of really the only medieval aesthetic aspect that the movie has. Otherwise, it's you know, very, very modern. And you get to spend some time with these guys, and you see that it's like, oh, okay, they have a pretty solid friendship. There's some world building that happens here. Early on in the film, Christian Bale and Gerard Butler's characters are acting out what they remember about Star Wars.
Well, specifically The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. And then once they complete their little play, you know, for all the kids in the community, they then do a really interesting bit of world building where, you know, where they talk about what essentially the plan is. The plan is when a dragon appears in the sky. Well,
the way they frame it is they say, all right, it's bedtime, and all the kids are moaning like, no, tell another one. Tell the one with the shark. Do Lion King, which is cute. I was actually like, that's cute.
Yeah.
But then they say, no, it's bedtime. We all have to do our prayers. And the prayers are all like, what do we do when we see them? Like, we run, we hide, dig deep, dig fast, don't look back. And it's like, okay, all right, this is interesting. I understand how they are trying to teach a new generation who's going to have to live in a world with fucking dragons. It also sets up a major thematic element of the movie, which is that this is a community whose foundation is built on fear.
Yes. And I think all of this would actually play as more interesting in retrospect if they had taken out the voiceover and explanatory stuff during the opening credits.
Yes, there is bad VO during this whole, well, this is what happened during the Dragon Apocalypse.
The dragons came.
Well, and unfortunately, and this is a problem in some other movies, when Christian Bale has to do his grumble gruff performance to tell you what's happening in the post-apocalypse, it's just not good.
I'm the leader of the resistance.
Yes, right. My name's John Connor. So I don't know why we get.
And I'm 7 years old.
yeah, baby voice. No fable what we make. So this whole setup's interesting. Unfortunately, I think Reign of Fire. The problem that I have with the movie is that it's a movie about dragons existing and trying to survive with dragons, and yet the dragons are never interesting.
No, and the movie doesn't ever pay any sort of service to the silliness of the concept, and it should. This movie should be fun, and it's never fun.
It is aggressively dour.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's cool, you know, when a movie can be dour and yet the audience can have fun at the same time. But this isn't a movie where that happens. This is treated with such a sense of, I don't know, inappropriate self-seriousness, and that's really the movie's biggest problem. You know, of course there are going to be problems when you market a movie that people think is going to have certain elements in it, and then they go and see the movie and they're like, oh, well, actually I was sold the wrong thing. I was sold what the studio wanted and not actually what the movie was. And that's unfortunate. But when you evaluate the movie for what it actually is, which I think is easier all these years later, you see, well, okay, it's got one major problem, and it's the fact that it doesn't stop to have any fun along the way.
I mean, and that's the thing. I'm not asking for the camp sci-fi movie version of this premise, because that's certainly been done.
Sure.
And most of those movies aren't good.
They have Dean Cain in them.
Yes. Lou Diamond Phillips or somebody. So it's like, yes, I don't want it to just be that. I want the movie can take its premise seriously, but still be rousing. Like Reign of Fire is never rousing. It's really grim.
Yeah. I mean, look at, similar sort of action horror creature films like, whether it be Predator or Aliens or Dog Soldiers, anything like that, those movies all have very serious tones to them, but they also have senses of humor to sort of match and, find a tonal balance. And it doesn't ever develop enough of a sense of personality to have that. Yes, there are characters that are oddly endearing. And I actually oddly cared about Gerard Butler's character in this movie.
He gives a surprisingly warm, goofy performance.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of a correct fit for him. And then Bale, he's a serious actor and he takes this role very seriously.
Of course he does.
Yeah, because he's Christian Bale. But that also means he's not really putting in bad work. I think the work he puts in is good. It's certainly what the movie seems to want, is to take this so seriously.
It's what the movie's asking of him, and the problem is, since Christian Bale is taking this so seriously, I think that doubles down on the macro problem of the movie. Like, he's not bad, but Quinn as a character is not that interesting.
Agreed. And that's when they bring in Denton Van Zandt, played by Matthew McConaughey.
Beautiful. Mwah. Love that name.
It's a great character name.
Who comes in riding a tank. He's a burly American with tribal tattoos that kind of look like dragon wings. He's smoking a cigar. He's bald head. And it's Matthew McConaughey.
He's got great facial hair going on, like really good facial hair.
He has big Woody Harrelson in War for the Planet of the Apes energy.
Apes.
And this character comes in and you're like, oh, this is the movie.
Right. And I think because he's top billed and his face is biggest on the poster, because that's what, happens when actors negotiate for contracts.
Well, and to be fair, at this point, Joe Popcorn didn't know who the hell Christian Bale was.
No, this is pre-Batman Christian Bale. If you had seen fucking Newsies, maybe you knew.
Right, like film nerd stuff like Empire of the Sun or something. But
sure,
at this point, Christian Bale and Gerard Butler were nobodies to American audiences. But Matthew McConaughey comes in his big tank, chomping a cigar with his crazy, unique-looking hand axe that he has, and it's like, this guy I want to watch a movie about. And McConaughey, of course, is giving it his best Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation scene chewing. Like, he almost saves the movie for me.
He damn near saves the movie, but the problem is the character Denton Van Zandt is never intended to be anything but, yeah, I mean, he's like barely a secondary character. He's pretty much a tertiary character in the film.
Well, he's presented as a foil to Quinn because he challenges Quinn, saying, like, you all aren't fighting the dragons. We're a convoy of soldiers who are dragon hunters. And look, I got this big tooth that I killed in this from this dragon in Kansas and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, this guy's a character. He's Quint-ish in certain ways, where he's so crazy about killing dragons, but he is there to offer the best thematic conflict to Quinn, to say, like, you raising this generation in fear is not going to help things.
Right.
Like, you've given up. And so I'm like, this Van Zandt guy's kind of an ass, and he's a pompous American, and he's a big brute, but he's right.
He is correct. I mean, Quinn's whole character arc is getting to hope again. So, yeah, the movie executes that in, I think, the most pedestrian way possible. And I think it would have helped if Denton Van Zandt were actually present in the first act of the film with his own plot, getting to know who he is and how he relates to his soldiers. Because that becomes a focus, the soldiers, the American soldiers, sort of, setting up shop in the encampment becomes a big chunk of the movie. And I think it would be a big improvement if we had a better idea of what his relationship to his soldiers were like, particularly his relationship to his sort of second in command, played by Isabella Scorupco.
Who's a nobody. Like, it's so I feel so bad for her.
And she deserves much better.
Completely agree. And it's clear that there are concepts in the movie that the writer was like, we just have to figure out how to do this because this is a cool idea. And Van Zandt is the conduit for one of the best concepts in the movie, which is, we have these guys that jump out of a helicopter and cast nets on dragons so that we can kill them. They're called archangels. And it's like, who are these people? The movie gives us nothing about them. They may as well be crash test dummies.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the point, is that Denton Van Zandt knows they're expendable. So he needs to replenish his ranks with more men. And that makes him immoral.
It is, but when you and I were talking about it, you made a really good connection where it's like, where is the aliens in this? Where is us in the locker room meeting, Dietrich and Vasquez? Like, you don't need a lot. You just need a little, so that when these guys do eventually jump out of a helicopter and have their big trying to catch the dragon sequence, that we care something about them.
Right. And it ultimately would mean that Van Zandt and his people become a larger part of the movie, which I think would make it an improvement, even if Christian Bale's character and, his goings on with Gerard Butler are still like the primary focus of the film. Like, it would have been a better, like, two-hander between Bale and McConaughey, which is, kind of what the film thinks it is, but it's kind of failing at that. And, in short, the movie has so much going on that it's executing well. Like, there's so much alien inspired stuff. Like, the movie feels triumphantly in moments like Aliens and Alien 3, where it's like, yeah, this is fucking nailing the look of it. And the score is pretty good. The score is by Edward Shearmore.
It's good, but it feels, it's basic.
It's certainly nothing that's exceptional or like begging to be noticed, but that's kind of like what Rob Bowman does with style too. Like, yeah, this is all really good, but it's never stuff that's going to grab you by the throat and go, look at my artistry.
But one thing I do want to touch on before we switch gears, I want to come back to the dragons, because that's what this Versus is about. And that's what Reign of Fire should be about.
Yeah.
I think Reign of Fire, I'm not going to get into digital effects. We'll talk plenty about digital dragon effects in a bit. But one of the things I think Reign of Fire fails on so bad, not only do the dragons never feel like characters, like they might as well be tornadoes in the way that the movie presents them. I also think there's never a really good hero shot of a dragon in the movie.
Which is a shame, because I think some of the effects work, like, I know you didn't want to get there, but like some of the effects works really fucking good.
They're not bad. I mean, I don't think they're terrible. I think the opening in which we see a dragon, who we find out is the big male dragon, because there's one bull dragon and he's the only male. And we see him in the shadows and kind of see his eyes. And then he crawls out of this tunnel where this elevator is, where Quinn as a child is in, and we see him look in at Quinn with a scary dragon eye. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a bad dragon villain. That's it. There's never another comparable shot where we feel like the dragons are characters. They're often shot at a very far distance, like almost landscape shots where it's like, yeah, there's a dragon and he's kind of taking up maybe, I don't know, 8% of the frame.
I feel like the intention there was to not humanize them at all, to not give them recognizable emotions or have reaction shots, or not to anthropomorphize them at all. And I can understand that intention, but honestly, I feel like it would have amplified the drama to give them reaction shots and better close-ups. It would have been beneficial.
They don't need to be they just need to be, Bruce in Jaws.
Sure.
Like, that's all I need. And it's unfortunate because there are moments when I think there's a sense, because something we should talk about before we switch gears, as far as effects go, is there's some practical stuff. They build a big dragon corpse, which is awesome. It's never lit well.
No, I mean, those exteriors though, those daytime exteriors, they look like crap. And then, later on at nighttime, they light it with a torch. So yeah, I wish we saw more of it, but it's like, there's some nice gore on it and stuff like that. And then when Bale pulls that egg out of it, it's like, ooh, this is goopy fun. I like that. All right.
That's great. That's fantastic. I wish there was more of that in the movie. That kind of spirit.
Yeah, those sort of basic creature pleasures.
Well, because I don't get the feeling watching Reign of Fire that Reign of Fire has any admiration for its creatures.
Yeah, and it definitely should. Yeah, it should celebrate its creatures more than it does. There are some sort of basic expectations of what a dragon movie should do, just like there are, I think, are basic expectations of like what we want out of a shark movie.
Right.
I understand that's largely defined by Jaws, but
But also, I mean, the last two things, kind of talking about the climax of Reign of Fire, because you talk about the exterior shots. This is Russo brothers dumpster puddle gray for the majority of it. I mean, maybe that means people will like it because people seem to love that stuff. But for me, I'm like, I might as well be looking at sandpaper.
It's a little nicer because it's shot on film and it has a little bit more contrast.
Fair enough.
But there's a huge problem with this movie that is not the movie's fault at all. And this is the first time I noticed it, because stuff like this tends to go a little bit more unnoticed when it's in a worse format. Like, this is my first time seeing the film in high definition, and in a couple scenes I noticed, hey, Matthew McConaughey's character has a fake beard and a bald cap on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, they do a pretty good job with trying to hide that stuff. But there are two sequences I saw in this where I was like, something happened in production. Like, there was clearly something that happened where this was shot at a different time. This was either additional photography or this happened before they could shave his head and do the rest of principal photography that way. So it was like, what the fuck happened? So you and I went on the trivia page for IMDb, and turns out the production on this was severely affected by an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease in Ireland at the time. So they had a bunch of scenes that they were planning on shooting, and they had to abandon them.
Yes, and I'm assuming that is a big reason for why this climax. I'm sorry, this climax is bad.
It's unambitious and rushed, and yeah, it's really lackluster.
Well, there's a big moment that was used in all of the marketing in which Matthew McConaughey is jumping off the top of a tower with his cool, characteristic axe that he's about to slash into the face of a dragon that's coming at him, and then he just gets chomped right away. It's so anticlimactic to the point where it's like, is that supposed to be funny? I don't know, because this is not a funny movie.
No.
So it's like, oh, they gave him this axe that they clearly spent time designing. Like, it's a very, very distinct axe, and nothing ever comes of it. And then the movie, by the time the ending happens, in which Quinn is shooting some explosive arrow into the male dragon's mouth, the movie is moving in a way that feels like it's just rushing to get over.
Yeah, and it's putting no sense of panache or flair into the filmmaking. Like, they just shoot the explosive arrow in the dragon's mouth. It barely even goes boom, and the dragon's just dead, and the movie's pretty much over. There is an epilogue scene. It's like, well, I wish there was a better climax to go before that epilogue.
Well, and the epilogue is a payoff to a absolutely inert romance.
Yeah, Bill and Skorupko's characters, they try to force romance between the two of them, and it's just it ain't working.
So yeah, we'll come back to Reign of Fire in a little bit when we get to the versus final summation part. But we got to talk about Dragonheart, baby. Dragonheart, a movie that I had very distinct memories of seeing in the theater. It was a big event. They sold it in the same way that they sold Superman the movie. The famous tagline of Superman the movie was, "You will believe a man can fly." The tagline of Dragonheart was just, "You will believe."
Yeah, and the posters for this were very, very strong. You know, I definitely think that they did a good job sort of designing the marketing for this film to capture the imaginations of children, which is, you know, what movies like this are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And this is, you know, set in, I guess, some version of England, because they make mentions of King Arthur.
They even mention a specific time that it happens. It's like 900 something AD.
Word. It's trying for some kind of basis there, but we know it's like, okay, there's a dragon. It's going to be, this might as well be taking place in Middle Earth. And this was a big event movie at the time. It's a movie that I was dreading revisiting, because I'm like, I just remember it as like, I'm a wide-eyed kid going to the movie, seeing a dragon movie. And upon revisiting it, Dragonheart is remarkably, insanely bad.
It's a shit show. Like,
That didn't take long.
Well, it's late. Look, folks, Drew and I, now that we have a little bit more time to hang out with one another digitally, used a Chrome extension called Netflix Party so that we could watch this together and in sync. I'm glad we did, because I would have had a really hard time not turning this off if I were watching it by myself. It's rare that I have this big a problem watching a film for genre vision, because I can sort of normally, like, I can turn on my analysis brain and think, oh, okay, you know, there's this and there's this, and, you know, I can kind of focus on technical aspects and stuff like that. But with this, my God.
Well, okay, so I gotta be the Dragon's advocate here. So Dragonheart has a stacked cast.
Sure.
Dennis Quaid, David Thewlis, Pete Postlethwaite, Dina Meyer, our girl Dina Meyer. Like, come on.
Sure.
Dina. Gotta love her. You know, Julie Christie's in this. Wonderful cult character actors like Brian Thompson.
Hell yeah.
Jason Isaacs shows up as kind of like a Foppy Jafar-esque character in a stupid hat. And obviously you have Sean Connery as the voice of the cartoon dragon. It's a phenomenal cast. And this is one of those mid-90s movies where when you revisit it, you're like, wow, the definition of what had to be as broad as possible is so different than what it is today. Because this is one of the most broad 4-quadrant movies we've done ever on the show, in such a way that I think it ends up strangely being for nobody.
Well, if it's for anybody, it's for kids, because that's what the franchise, like, there are 5 Dragonheart movies. They just came out with one a couple months ago.
Yep.
There are 5 Dragonheart movies, and they're all like directed at 13 and under. And I get it.
If they are, I mean, I can't speak to those movies. Like, I've not seen a frame of them. But for Dragonheart itself, it's like, yes, it's trying to appeal to kids. It's trying to appeal to the kid, the fantasy, you know, kid in everybody. And this, you know, Dragonheart was very successful. And it's clear that as that kind of extremely broad movie, it worked on audiences. You know, 20 plus years later, it does not. It feels so antiquated to the point where I said to you, it's like, this movie is a Saturday morning cartoon in some ways, the worst of ways.
I was reminded of stuff like Hercules and Xena, you know, where it was just like characters in unremarkable sort of brownish, muddy leather costumes were sort of gallivanting around, and there's bad sword fight choreography, and just like the better version of this is something like Willow to me, where it's like, yeah, there are kind of similar approaches to the way that it portrays high fantasy settings and high fantasy characters. Like, yeah, it's the, you know, the people who wear brown leather that live in huts near the river. Like, it's just, you know, it has those same sorts of characters, same sorts of settings, same sorts of creatures.
Yeah.
But its approach to tone and the way that it approaches our love of high fantasy iconography is different enough that Dragonheart suffers.
Well, it's interesting. We picked these two movies because dragons, but also they both are directed by a guy named Rob.
They are.
This one's This one's Rob Cohen. My biggest problem with Dragonheart, so we're going to talk about it being bad, but why I think that's kind of discussion worthy, is that this movie is so flat 90% of the time in terms of lighting and the staging of the camera, the blocking, everything. It's really boring. I think more than what's going on in the script or performances or anything. I think the thing that is wheedling away when you're watching this movie is the fact that it is just boring looking as fuck.
Well, you look at Rob Cohen's filmography, and he has just this huge list of stylistically uninteresting action blockbuster films.
Right.
Dragonheart, The Fast and the Furious, Triple X, Stealth, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, Alex Cross, etc., etc. None of these movies are terribly visually interesting, although there's, been a large degree of box office success with Cohen's films. So it's easy to see why he gets work.
Well, and I think he understands going for that broadest audience possible. And that's what I keep coming back to with Dragonheart, is that the comedy it's nothing but underhand softball pitches. Like the comedy is so, it's bad. I'll admit that. Even somebody who when Pete Postlethwaite shows up and he is this poet character that's following around Dennis Quaid's night, you were always like, oh, thank God Pete Postlethwaite's here to save the movie. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he is in just as bad a shape as everybody else. We just love him because he's Pete Postlethwaite.
Sure. And I made a couple of jokes while we were watching the movie. Like, I really feel bad for Pete Postlethwaite's back because he's having to lift this fucking movie up.
Well, I think that's just you personally loving him, because I'm like, he's falling victim to all the bad comedy that every other character is. He's, but he can't help but be Pete Postlethwaite. So he's just we love him.
Sure.
And I think there's elements of that. Like David Thewlis in this, oh my God, he just the kid that they get to play the younger version of him. He's the villain king of the movie. I said it was like he just has a face that's made to be shoved into lockers, the poor kid. And they had to make that out of David Thewlis when he shows up. And I'm like, man, he just looks like, I think I called him like King Incel at one point.
Yeah, pretty much. His kid's name is Einon, who I thought, I didn't watch this with subtitles, but it really sounds like Dennis Quaid is yelling Hyman for the first 15 minutes of the Hyman. One of the things you realize pretty early on in Dragonheart is that, yes, there's a really big, expensive CGI dragon in this movie. And there's some really nice special effects, like on-screen or on-set explosions and things like that. That's really nice. But otherwise, the movie feels like cripplingly unepic and small. The king in the opening of the story, who's, David Thewlis' character's father, he is riding on a horse. He goes into a tiny little village, and then a whole bunch of villagers come out and just smush him to death with shovels. It's well, that was small. Where are all this guy's bodyguards or whatever? He's the king.
This is where early on there was kind of a camp value to be had from you, because we made a joke, like a Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference. I immediately thought of that, in the frozen lands of Nador, they were forced to eat Robin's minstrels, and there was much rejoicing. Yay.
Yeah.
This movie, it's completely unintentional, I think, the silliness and badness of it. Obviously, I mean, the easy target is to say, oh yeah, the Draco dragon looks like shit now, and it's fine, but I don't think that's the problem with it.
No. The problem was that it was 1996, and this was an incredibly ambitious effects film in that regard. So has the CGI from 1996 aged all that well? No, but it's just an artifact of the time.
I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem comes because here's the thing. Your boy Phil Tippett is the guy that they got in to help, with what they were attempting to do.
Yeah.
So there are elements of the model that I actually think look pretty good. And you and I even said there's one or two shots where they were like, that's your trailer shot, baby.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think there are moments where the effects really, really shine. And it's that's the reason to go see this movie is those shots they put in the trailer. But close-ups on this thing talking, they haven't aged well. And when I saw this in theaters in 1996 when I was fucking 9 years old, did I care? Absolutely not. And I wouldn't expect a 9-year-old to care today.
Well, that's where I come around. it's not the quality of the CGI that's the problem. It's the intention and design that I don't think was good then and has only become worse with age, because they have to give Draco, the dragon, this very, very humanized face.
Yes.
In terms of proportion. So when he looks directly into the camera or in profile, he kind of just looks like a person, but with sort of dragony features. Like, he has a very cartoon rounded snout.
He's got a very blunted head. It doesn't have this big elongated sort of serpentine head.
He looks like Toad from Super Mario. Like, not the movie, but, you know, he's just got that very stripped down basic kind of...
It's like a Flintstones dinosaur or something like that.
Yeah, he looks like Dino.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the problem is in the design, not the limitations of the technology at the time.
Well, and also they had to keyframe all of the facial animation for this. Like, motion capture with facial animation hadn't been done yet, like to the level required. Like, they were even keyframing all of Gollum's animations in the face in the Lord of the Rings movies.
And the thing is, I told you, I was like, the worst thing about the design is Draco's upper lip, especially when he is talking and he's profiled the camera. His lips go too far off of his face because they're trying to make, you know, if he's making like an ooh sound, they have to really animate those lips, and they animate it so far off the face that it looks completely ridiculous.
Yeah, and cartoonish, like you said before. So
yes,
Draco works in fits and spurts as a character. The sound design and the performance from Sean Connery, it always just feels like he's stuck in a cardboard box. It never seems to be coming out of this big creature. It seems to be a really poor choice in sound design. They wanted to make sure it just sounded like Sean Connery, and it does, but it sounds like Sean Connery's in a refrigerator box 2 feet away from you. Let me out. Like,
I'd be interested to hear this in the, you know, proper sound setting to see if it's like, well, were they trying to make it sound, you know, deeper and bellowy, and that was their approach to it and it didn't work. I think my main issue as far as Sean Connery's performance goes is that I don't know if he's trying to put on an affectation at all as Draco, or if that's an effect in post, but there's something going on there.
Nothing interesting, though.
No, it's not interesting. But what is interesting, and this is something we could only see nowadays, and again, I think this adds incredible camp value to the movie, is that much like Jaws 3D, as we talked about in our Finflix episode, Dragonheart is shockingly gay.
Oh my God. There are so many moments in this movie where I was just waiting for them to kiss. For Dennis Quaid with his piratey ass voice to kiss this big fake dragon. I mean, they are one long pause away from full on makeout.
There's clearly a desire to have a boy and his dog type template between these characters. And because there's a shot where because they, you know, make this whole racket up where Dennis Quaid pretends to slay him and gets, you know, money from the villagers. Where they are walking away in a field and the camera's far away and we just see their backs. And Draco is walking like a fucking puppy. And she's like, doop, 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 doop. But instead of it being a boy and his dog, it's a boy and his boy. It's
two daddies, and they love each other very much. So that idea of like a con artist who runs a con on medieval villages because a dragon is his friend, like that seems actually, you know, enough of a concept that would be fun to see on a movie screen.
Sure.
And it's probably one of the ideas that got this movie made in the first place. People went, oh no, that's an interesting idea. A medieval con man, an Arthurian tale about a guy who brings his dragon along and they fake killing the dragon so that he can make money. You know, that's the kind of idea that can get a movie greenlit.
Sure.
In execution, it ends up being a lot more about like, the mechanics of like, oh, this dragon gave his heart, you know, metaphysically speaking, to this dying kid who eventually grew up to become a really shithead king, played by David Thewlis. And in order to defeat David Thewlis's character, they'll have to kill the dragon, because their hearts are tied together magically.
Right. So like David Thewlis can't die. He's basically immortal unless Draco is also killed, which means that the big conflict is building up to, well, Dennis Quaid is going to have to kill his boyfriend, the dragon.
It's a clever inversion on one level of the classic dragon story where the king gets a brave knight to kill the dragon. Here it is a knight getting a brave dragon to kill the king.
Well, it's the knight has to kill the dragon to kill the king, and the dragon's actually the good, because there's all this lore that is hinted at from dialogue from Draco, like, yeah, dragons don't attack people unless they're provoked. Dragons were cool with humans. If I die and I haven't been a good dragon, I will basically disappear or go to dragon hell. I won't go to dragon heaven, which is a constellation up in the sky. All this stuff.
Oh, by the way, King Arthur is real, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, God, yeah, they go and visit, I guess, Camelot or something.
Avalon.
Yes, they go to Avalon, and the ghost of King Arthur reminds Dennis Quaid to not be a shitheel and be a good guy. There's weird stuff in this movie, which I dig.
And I like the sort of weirdness to that approach, but where the movie sunk so low for me is just in the basics of it being a medieval action movie. There is one scene where it's about halfway through the movie, Einon, the shithead king, comes across Dennis Quaid, who helped raise him. And he's like, aha, now I'm going to kick your ass now that I'm grown. And he takes out a sword, and they have a sword fight in the middle of the fucking river in front of a waterfall. Should be pretty epic, right? No. Nope. This is shit.
The choreography is poor, and again, Cohen's direction is so bland, where he doesn't understand how to dynamically frame these characters or the action. Also, the script is being very poor by just having them yell at each other their intentions. I made the reference to you of Revenge of the Sith, where it's literally on that, like, you were the chosen one. You were supposed to help things out, and I hate you.
But there's more drama and style in that. You know what I mean?
Fair
at
enough.
At least it leans into that kind of like operatic melodrama, whereas this is like, what the fuck is this?
Well, there's moments, because I do want to give the movie some props. There's clearly cool ideas that they're actually executed well in this. One of them is Draco is telling Dennis Quaid's character, who I can't remember the name of.
Bowen.
He's like, you have to kill me. You have to kill me to kill David Thewlis, Einon. And he shoots fire out of his nose, and Bowen just stands there, and it's framed with, the two flames on either side of him. He's just standing there. I'm like, that's a cool idea. There's a couple moments where the imagery of the movie peeks through and is like, oh, did second unit shoot this? Yeah. Like what's going on here? Because this is like, there's a couple like that one moment of Einon the Knight, silhouetted against the sun, and Draco comes up with your big trailer shot, the shot of him, Draco shooting out of the waterfall and stuff. It's like, these are the things that sold the movie to people, but it's not a constant enough presence. But when it happens, and it happens a couple more times, it's like, fuck yes.
Sure. I was watching Mask of Zorro earlier in that day. If you want to hear me talk about it, go to patreon.com and sign up and listen to our latest extended currently consuming. But, there are shots in the Mask of Zorro where the hero is on horseback and he rises up against the sun, and you create that iconic silhouette. And it's beautiful. There are a couple of moments in Dragonheart that are like approaching that, where it's like, yeah, like this is creating a memorable image. It's having a moment. And I really liked that. That's more than I can say about Reign of Fire in that regard, which is like, this should have a couple of iconic moments with dragons that look this cool. It should be iconic. And it doesn't ever reach that. Dragonheart's got those couple of iconic moments, but I think I said this to you earlier, but like Dragonheart is a movie that is twice as doofy as it should be. And Reign of Fire should be twice as doofy as it is.
Well, I think that leads into kind of our final summation versus segment, because here's the thing. I admit Reign of Fire is the better movie of these two, but I'm giving the win to Dragonheart because it's a more remarkable movie, even though that remarkableness is that it's bad.
I can't necessarily disagree with anything you've said. Dragonheart is certainly more remarkable in many regards. But if you're going to ask me like which one I would rather watch again right now, it's Reign of Fire.
See, I would rather watch Dragonheart, but unfortunately, and I try not to do this, it would be from an ironic standpoint. Like, I would be making fun of the movie. And that's certainly, you know, because we were watching it together, what we kind of got into a groove on. We were riffing on stuff and everything. And Dragonheart is a movie that I think when I said to you, I was like, there's camp value in this. And you were like, is there? As it continued to go on, I'm like, there's just so many poor decisions, but they are ridiculously poor decisions, that it was more entertaining. I will cop to that. Part of my enjoyment watching Dragonheart this time around did come from a sense of schadenfreude with you, because you really didn't like this movie when we were watching it, and there was something really funny about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you said it to Danielle, you're like, Travis is in hell. And there were a couple moments where I just flat out told you, like, this sucks. Like, this is shit. Like, I really didn't have a good time watching this movie. I mean, once I admitted to you, like, I was really miserable, I had a laughing fit, but that's only because, like, that's the first time it's happened between us on this show.
Right. It's just, I mean, it's like, I am miserable, and I ran with it. It's like, yeah, I don't mind riffing on this because it's not good. Like, I'm not trying to say that Dragonheart is good at being a bad movie.
Like, you know those scenes in Willow where they dressed up Kevin Pollak and some other guy as like miniature pixies?
Right.
And they had silly accents? Like, imagine those scenes but stretched to feature length.
I didn't find it that abrasive, but I get what you're saying. Reign of Fire had very, very few moments, if any, for me. Dragonheart had not only this camp aspect, but also when it had a moment, it had a really good moment. Like, a small thing, Julie Christie's character, who's the mother of Einan, David Thewlis, at one point is going to kill Draco to kill her own son. And she says something to him to the effect of, like, I'm trying to right the wrongs. Like, I'm trying to end a creature that should not have existed, saying it to her son. And even you and I both at the time went like, I felt something.
Yeah, I was like, damn, that Julie Christie snapped really hard on that dude, and he deserved it. Like, the movie builds an effective shithead. I'll say that. Like, you want to hate David Thewlis's character, and the movie makes you do that. So, yeah,
cartoonishly so. There's zero redeeming qualities. He's not a person. He is a straw man to be burnt, like, by the end of the movie. But that's the thing, is the good moments in Dragonheart, few and far between they may be, are exceptionally good to me. Whereas Reign of Fire, even its best moments are kind of like, oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, I think Reign of Fire overall for me is a more even movie. Even if that means, like, overall it's like a little bit more, you know, a boring watch. For me, it's an easier watch. Like, it would be a background watch movie. Like, this is never bad. Like, there was one moment in Reign of Fire where I actually managed to feel something, and that's when Gerard Butler's character dies.
That's framed really well.
Yeah.
Like, the setup of that death where he is in a little tunnel and a door is closing and we see the fire coming to get him just as the door closes. It's like, yeah, that might be the best moment in the movie, and it's the one truly, like... Well,
there's the moment where Matthew McConaughey's character jumps off the top of, like, the APC to avoid getting, you know, burnt to a crisp by a dragon. And he does the hero landing. He does the superhero landing. It's like,
I don't even remember
cool.
that.
Oh, okay.
So like, I would say it's like, yeah, if you're going to watch one, Reign of Fire is probably the one that it deserves more eyeballs than it's gotten. I guess, but Dragonheart is the one that, like, oh my gosh, like, this is one of those movies that it's an important experience where it's like, yeah, I remember loving this as a kid and had a great time seeing it, and seeing it now, like, oh, this is terrible.
If I had an 8-year-old, you know what I mean? I would rather show them Dragonheart than Reign of Fire. And it's not just because of, like, tone. I mean, they're both, you know, PG-13 movies.
Right.
But if I wanted somebody to have a good time as a kid, I'd show them Dragonheart. And it's clear that, like, that's the reason that this has had staying power and sequels even to this day.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a younger man, I would go down the Dragonheart sequel rabbit hole, because I'm fascinated that something like that can have that many sequels, and what's changed, especially considering dragons in pop culture and what they're kind, because I look at that new one, I think it's called like Dragonheart Vengeance, and I'm like, yeah, they're riffing on Game of Thrones. It's like a close up on a blue dragon eye. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Sure. But I mean, both of these are, strong effects films when it comes to the dragons, and one of them, the effects have clearly aged better just overall. But,
sure.
My win goes to Reign of Fire, because if I were given the choice between watching one of them now, it'd have to be Reign of Fire.
Well, you know where my Dragonheart lies. So I think now is the perfect time to head to the shelf, where we pick a movie that might act as a good substitute in this case for Dragonheart, or pairing for our main topic. And as always, we want to encourage you loyal listeners to go to genrevision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks, which we will feature in next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Reign of Fire versus Dragonheart?
I'm going to pull off a dragon film that is relatively recent. It is kid friendly. As a matter of fact, it's made for kids. It's rated PG and has great dragon effects in it. And that's Pete's Dragon, the remake by David Lowery.
Oh yeah, I need to see this, because you have certainly given it quite the hype.
It's good. Its heart is totally in the right place. It has a really unique feel to it because it's a David Lowery movie. Like he did Ain't Them Bodies Saints and Ghost Story. Like it's
sure he can't help but be David Lowery.
Yes. And so that fit for a Disney live action remake is like, what a strange idea. I mean, Pete's Dragon, the original film, I haven't seen since I was really, really little. I don't hardly remember anything about it.
Me too.
So I know this is very, very different from the original Pete's Dragon film. I know it's just a very, very different story, but I found it to be very affecting. It's got a good cast in it. Bryce Dallas Howard, Robert Redford, Wes Bentley. Carl Urban plays the villain. Like, come on.
It's good shit. I'm always here for some Carl Urban.
Yeah, I recommend this movie. I wouldn't exactly, say I highly recommend it, but if you're looking for a pretty decent dragon movie to show your kid that actually has more to offer from a grown-up perspective too, like Pete's Dragon and a heartbeat, do it.
Well, I wanted to find a dragon movie that kind of, because when we talked about Reign of Fire and Dragonheart, we talked about how they couldn't be further apart on the tonal spectrum. One is so grim and dour and self-serious and po-faced, and the other is so goofy and broad that I don't think they ever quite work being that far in either of those territories. So I wanted to pick a dragon movie that we've actually done on this show. I'm recommending Dragon Slayer because after seeing both of these movies, I like Dragon Slayer more. Like after, like, we stand by the things that we said about that, but upon thinking about that movie after watching these two, I was like, Dragon Slayer hit the right balance.
Agreed. It is making a really interesting villain out of its dragon. It's got some surprisingly gnarly stuff in it.
But it's also fun. Like, there's the whole wizard. Like, Peter McNichol, I stand by my criticism about him being miscast. But there's an attempt at, some sense of humor and fun to the character. But it's also got some very dark, dour, grim, nasty stuff. And the moment that I was thinking of when I was watching Reign of Fire about the dragons not being characters is the moment in Dragon Slayer when Vermithrax comes across its dead children.
Yeah. Yep.
And that moment and it nuzzling it and then growling, screaming, and I was like, oh, this is a character. Like, they made this thing into a character.
And this is, an influential effects film to this day. I mean, this is a Tippett masterpiece, an ILM masterpiece, and yes, the seams do show, but it's incredibly important to the fabric of high fantasy as we understand it now. And, there's some political stuff going on in it too, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And I think in terms of capturing mood, like Reign of Fire went too far in being grim and dour, and Dragonheart went too far in being goofy and sunny. And Dragon Slayer has it's scary at times. Like you say, oh, I'd rather show an 8-year-old, Dragonheart, I'm like, I'd show an 8-year-old Dragon Slayer if I think they were ready for it. Because it's got edge to it.
It does. I mean, I remember Peter McNichol killing the baby dragons from seeing it on TV when I was a kid. Like that definitely stuck with me because it was like, oh, this is nasty. This is really nasty.
Yeah, it's nasty, and it's, again, like I'm not saying Dragon Slayer is a great movie. I stand by the things that we talked about in our episode of it, but I have a lot more respect and admiration for it after watching these two movies. I think I think it deserves that reappraisal as far as like, well, if you're going to do a dragon movie, it's not a bad one to look back at.
Not at all.
Yep, so we got to talk about the listener shelf picks from our last episode on Super Mario Brothers, and bless you all, you came out with plenty. We've got from T-Bones McRoanoke, Jupiter Ascending, which T-Bones, check the podcast schedule.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say about that. Eric Fuchs recommended Freaked as a shelf pick for Super Mario Brothers, which is another very wackadoo, balls to the wall, committed bizarro movie, which we're also talking about possibly doing on the show. I don't know if y'all are sneaking into our DMs or something, but Freaked is a movie that we've talked about doing on the show. So thank you for that, Eric. Stephen Nesbella said, considering I never really saw this, Captain America from 1990. The title and costume seem right, but the movie is bad. Yeah, I know I've seen that when I was a younger, maybe, preteen or so. And that's my memory of it being bad. Mr. Milksteak, their shelf pick was Rampage from 2018. It's just a big, dumb, ridiculous VFX reel of a movie. And probably is. I mean, Rampage is a movie I want to see, but I have a feeling it won't be as goofy and dumb as I want it to be, because I played my fair share of that video game when I was a kid.
I don't think I played much Rampage, but like after seeing the trailers for Rampage, I was like, I don't. Nah.
Well, the problem is like, oh, it's just big CGI smashy cartoon stuff.
Yeah,
and that's no matter how good that looks at some point. Yeah, I don't know.
I also have a problem with the way that we use The Rock in cinema these days. It's like he's like the most interesting looking dude, and he himself is a pretty interesting dude, and yet we put him in all these like bland hero roles.
Well, just not just playing hero roles, but have him stand in front of green screens while things crumble roles, where it's like, that's not the best use of him. He's got real chops.
Yeah, he's actually better used in stuff like Moana.
Sure, absolutely. I think it was even really good I didn't see the second one, but that first Jumanji. He was actually really fun in that.
You mean the second Jumanji?
Well, I guess technically, yeah, it's the second Jumanji, but it's its own thing. It's
sure.
Whatever. And last but not least, the wonderful Wall Drumpus commented with, I'm terrible at coming up with shelf picks. I haven't seen the Sonic movie. Maybe that would qualify. I mean, I talked about that on that for currently consuming on that Super Mario Brothers. And I think surprisingly, Sonic the Hedgehog is kind of what the Super Mario Brothers movie probably wanted to be, and that it was able to keep some of the weirdness of the property that's just inherent, but also work as something that was broader and more accessible. Super Mario Brothers just went way far in the weird category.
Boy, did it.
So as always, thank you all so much for the shelf picks. I love seeing those every week, and I hope we get some good ones for this week. But let's do some currently consuming.
Nom 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
I watched a documentary last night that I had seen a trailer for a while back when it was about to hit VOD, and it's called This One's for the Ladies, and it is all about male stripper dance shows in black communities. And it is hilarious.
You were sending us, Danny and I, like screenshots and some video clips of you watching it, and they were hysterical.
I mean, the movie is consciously like really, really funny. Technically, it's a very Shaggy movie. Like the camera work and the sound, it's like, yeah, this is clearly shot, really, really roughly, but it's got charm for days, man. And it embeds itself with some really interesting people. And it's in a lot of ways a celebration of female pleasure in the same way that like Magic Mike XXL is, but this is way more like street level, kind of like, you know, these are people from the hood like trying to hustle, and
it's authentic. I mean, Magic Mike XXL is
it's an idealization of a lot of that kind of stuff.
It's fantasy,
sure, and you know, delightfully so. This is the reality of it all, and it's very, very strange, but I found it a really heartwarming story that is just, again, it wants to be unabashedly sexy, and it is, and the interviews with the strippers in particular, really, really interesting. You know, why and how they got into this, and you know, how they met other strippers and things like that, and then, you know, the people who get interviewed and actually go to these shows, which, you know, they're not at like nightclubs or anything like that. Like one of the ones that they shoot quite a bit of footage of for the movie happened at a like a community center where clearly they teach like taekwondo and karate on the weekdays.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the trailer, and it's like, it looks like these take places in like VFW halls or something.
Yeah,
like those kind of places.
They'd be lucky to get a VFW hall to do this.
But yeah, it looks like a really fun time.
Yeah, I liked it. I think there's a bunch of people out there who would never be caught dead watching this. But it's on Hulu, and I recommend it.
Well, on a sadder note, this week as we're recording, we lost one of the absolute genre greats. That's Stuart Gordon, a director whose filmography, most people will probably know him for his Lovecraft adaptations like Reanimator, From Beyond,
Dagon,
yes, that's the one nobody wants to talk about, but I love Dagon. Look, Stuart Gordon, I will make an argument here. I don't think there's a bad Stuart Gordon movie. Now, I haven't seen every Stuart Gordon movie, but every Stuart Gordon movie I have seen, I have enjoyed on some level. And he was clearly he wasn't somebody who got stuck in genre. He loved genre. And he saw the value in it and how he could use it to be subversive. There's always something on his movie's mind. He was never an empty filmmaker. And he was somebody who was incredibly prolific and important in the stage theater world. He I believe was he formed the Organic Theater, and they were the people who put on the very first David Mamet play.
Wow.
And by all accounts, a super affable guy who was very supportive of people in the genre, who, you know, he was part of that whole Masters of Horror television series and experiment, and that group of creators, and just an absolute titan. You can't go wrong with any of his movies. I decided for Currently Consuming this week, when I heard that he passed, to check out a movie of his that I'd never seen. It's called Space Truckers. It stars Dennis Hopper, Stephen Dorff, Debbie Mizar, Charles Dance, George Wendt is in it.
Stacked.
It's like every Stuart Gordon movie. It is impossible not to feel the charm and the fun that man had when he made movies. Space Truckers isn't like a great movie, but it is so much fun. It's so kooky, which Stuart Gordon has a great kooky sense of humor. This is a PG-13 movie where George Wendt is sucked out of a tiny airlock window, and it's absolutely comedic.
He gets alien resurrectioned?
Yes, but in a total cartoon way. It's delightful. It's a movie where Charles Dance is a space pirate with a robot peg leg. It's an absolute hoot.
You know when somebody says something and then you immediately think, well, that's my tomorrow.
That just happened with Charles Dance with a robot peg leg.
Yeah.
And I recommend you watch any Stuart Gordon movie. If it's the ones he's the most known for, fine. You know, Reanimator's great. I love Reanimator. I have joyous memories of discovering that movie and making a bunch of people in my high school class watch it. And just the absolute revulsion and then hysterical laughter that people had watching that movie. It's a joy. And it's one of the reasons I hold that movie very near and dear to my heart. If I was going to recommend a Stuart Gordon movie you may not have seen, I would recommend Fortress. It's Stuart Gordon getting to make a Paul Verhoeven sci-fi movie. It's a prison movie. It's futuristic. Kurtwood Smith's in it. Spoiler alert, he explodes. It's amazing. There's all this weird stuff in the prison where all the prisoners have a bomb that's shoved down into their throats and then lands in their stomach. And it's like, oh, if you ever try and escape, it's going to blow up. We get to see this being implanted into Christopher Lambert. Just absolutely wonderful, goofball, fun stuff. Stuart Gordon will be missed. Like, I really think he is one of the absolute greats of the genre. And like I say, you can't go wrong with any of his movies. So celebrate him this week, and rest in peace, Stuart. We're going to miss you.
See you, Stuart.
So let's wrap things up in a very, very positive, uplifting way with our
Comment of the week.
And this is coming from Moldy Wilson. We had a number of comments on our Super Mario Brothers episode, and any one of them could have been comment of the week. You guys really came out, and thank you so much. But Moldy said, I'm so glad that you had something positive to say about this film, and was saying that, he remembered being disappointed by it, but still thought it was amazing. But then he says, a little off topic, but I only listen to Genre Vision posts after I've seen the film in question. So there's a huge back catalog of episodes that I haven't heard yet. So while I'm in quarantine and when the kids are asleep, I figure now's the time to watch some of them. So here is my Genre Vision playlist. And he posted the picture of the movies that he has made a playlist of that we've covered on the show that he's not seen. And he has an intention to watch them. And that floored me, man.
It's awesome to know that somebody takes our tastes seriously as curators. And I don't mean all that seriously because we don't take ourselves that seriously. But the fact that someone would curate a list based on our sense of curation is really heartwarming. Puts things in perspective for us. Made me feel great. So thank you, Moldy.
Thank you so much. And just thank you guys. Like, we said, this is a crazy time for all of us. And, we're going to be out here doing, we posted our kind of intention recently, in a little mini episode about we want to keep doing this. The show must go on. We want to give you guys something to talk about, something to take your mind off things, and hopefully inject some smiles into your weekly life. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this whole Genre Vision thing. Like, it really means the world to us. And hopefully you'll be here next week when we've had to change the schedule quite a bit considering everything that's happening with new releases. So next week we were going to be doing the New Mutants, but since we won't be able to see that since it's been pulled, we're going to do a double feature of 2 X-Men movies.
Oh fuck, that's right. This is coming up.
Yes, this was Travis's idea, so this is all on him. We're doing X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men First Class.
We wanted to take a sampling of okay, what are the 2 ends of the spectrum on the X-Men franchise? So
here we go. So we'll be back next week with another double header. So we hope you guys will be back. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.